Okay, my loves. I know there are a lot of you that are out there that are really wondering, how do I even set boundaries anymore? Maybe you didn't grow up with great boundaries. Maybe boundaries weren't really modeled well for you, or maybe you were told that you cannot have boundaries. Maybe you're tired of being gaslighted in your relationships, and you're tired of feeling crazy all the time and guilty for trying to make a difference in your life. If this is you, then I want you to come schedule a call with me. Let's chat about the Unashamed Image Program. The Unashamed Image Program is geared towards you specifically. I am going to be helping you in our next upcoming session of the Unashamed Image. I am personally going to train you how to not feel crazy when someone is gaslighting you, how to be able to stand your ground, to keep your boundaries intact, and to also see through the bull crap. I am also going to be teaching you how to set really confident boundaries that you can really rely on. And I'm going to help you communicate them in a way that really makes sense. Basically, I'm going to help you live a life free of shame and on your terms. If you are ready and you are done feeling all the shame and guilt for trying to set boundaries, if you are not willing to live another moment the way you are right now and in somebody else's shadow, then this is the time to schedule that call with me. It's completely free, no pressure, just love, just support. Go to www.erinandersonthetraumacoach.com. Scroll down the page to where it says, Let's Chat About Working Together. Click on that button and it'll take you to my booking page. If you're ready to live the unashamed life, schedule that call. Let's get you in the Unashamed Image Program, my loves. From my heart to your heart. Bye. Welcome to the other side of the struggle. This is a podcast where we talk about trauma, how to heal it, and then how to take it and use it to unlock your mission and your potential, and to use it to live your very best dream life. When you're dealing with betrayal trauma, it can be hard to know how to heal it, how to stop the pain, and to know what your next steps are to take in your own life. And these are the questions that we try to answer here. Trauma has the ability to rob us of our joy and identity, which is why it's so miserable to experience. But with the right tools and with the right mindset, we can totally reclaim that joy and even use this trauma to strengthen ourselves, so that way trauma does not knock us off of our joy again. Living your dream life should be a non-negotiable, but trauma tends to try to negotiate that with you. And even though trauma is not something that we will completely ever be free of in our life, the pain is negotiable. This is why I created Erin Anderson Betrayal Trauma Coaching and this podcast, is because I want my listeners, I want my clients to live, truly live free from the prison that trauma can put you in. I want you to live on the other side of the struggle. Trauma can be a beast. It has the potential to get you to believe things about yourself that just aren't true. Things like, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving, I'm not beautiful, and the list goes on. And each one of those beliefs cause a crack in our hearts. And I get it. going through my own betrayal trauma, these were a lot of the things that I used to think, plus many others. So when I had the meditation to see each one of those cracks as a way of healing, and not just of healing a flesh and blood heart, but the ability to heal a flesh and blood heart to gold, was transformational. And now I want to give you that exact same transformation for free. Pick up my Heart of Gold meditation. It is absolutely free, and I want to see it give you the exact same transformation that it did me. So check out the description below. Pick up the Heart of Gold meditation. The link is right there in the description. And while you're at it, don't forget to click on the Calendly link above to make sure that you schedule some one-on-one time with me to help you personally get through your betrayal trauma. All right, with that, let's listen to this week's episode. Hey, my fabulous listeners. I'm so glad you're back with me on another episode of The Other Side of the Struggle. And with such a fun topic, too. Like, I just love talking about gratitude all through the month of November and miracles. And it's just a really yummy topic, especially when you've been dealing with trauma and the pain that trauma can bring with it. When we get to step into miracles and gratitude, it's just a much more fabulous energy than the one that we're coming from when we're dealing with trauma. You know what I mean? And if you read the title, we're talking about using the 5-step thought process today to create a miracle, something that we can truly be grateful for. And, thinking back at my own healing journey, I can honestly say it was a miracle. And if you're dealing with trauma, that's something that you probably want, is you want to be able to be free from it. Now, that said, one thing that I want to reiterate with you is just the idea that trauma never truly goes away. By the time that this is released, it'll be a few weeks at this point, but my husband was recently in a car crash with a semi-truck. And that created a lot of trauma for me this week. To try to replace the car, to making sure he's been okay, insurance, like everything has been a bit traumatic. But what's different now is the way I view it, okay? Before something like this would have totally upended me, I would have been, shaking for days. And I'm not saying I wasn't shaking when it happened. I mean, that's not a phone call any wife wants to receive about their sweet husband. He's okay. Everything ended up working out okay in the end, and now I get to sit in the deep gratitude of it all. And thanks, Heavenly Father, that, he's all right. Nothing truly how do you say that? Catastrophic. That's the word I'm looking for. Really happened. And that we have another day together. The truth of the matter is my joy is still intact, whereas before my healing process, this would have robbed me of my joy.
Okay? So I want to say that trauma is not something that ever truly leaves your life. It's something that keeps coming up. But the way you respond to that trauma makes the difference. Totally, 100% makes the difference. And that's where the 5-step thought process comes in. And if you remember, it's your stimulus, the thoughts about the stimulus, your feelings, your actions, and then your results. And then oftentimes those results lead back into a stimulus. So it's kind of a cycle that happens. So let's talk about how to create a miracle from something that happens that you might view as a trauma. And if you remember that not all traumas are going to be like the beginning of a miracle. Like sometimes miracles feel really fun and creative and exciting and beautiful and wonderful. And I definitely think we need to create a podcast surrounding that. But, you know, miracles often for me also do feel like a trauma at the beginning, something pretty darn intense. And I've noticed that if I will just give it the opportunity to grow and to change and to teach me something, then oftentimes at the end of that trial or that trauma, I will find a perfect gift just for me, wrapped up in love by God. So let's dive into this thought, okay? So obviously, let's start with the stimulus, which would be whatever it was that caused the trauma. It could be a husband's addiction, your husband getting in a car crash with a semi. Yeah, that was not fun, guys. Ugh, it was not fun. That was an intense day. It could be something that your children do that you're not okay with. It could be the result of a wife's trauma, or a wife's betrayal of you. I mean, it's not just the guys that do the betraying. It could be parents divorcing. It could be the death of a parent. Like, there's so many things that cause trauma in this life. And if we allow the trauma to always do the talking, then it stays a trauma. And we never truly move past it. So you get what the stimulus is. You can fill in the blank here, okay? With whatever stimulus it is that's caused the trauma in your life, okay? There's many different traumas. But then we move into the thought process. And as I talked about just a minute ago, my thoughts have drastically changed around the stimuluses, okay? Yes, like when the stimulus happens, like this last week when my husband got in the car crash, right? It was really intense. My heart was racing. I was shaking. I was crying on the side of the road as I watched. And I should mention here that it wasn't just any car, it was actually my husband's work vehicle. And he was the one at fault, too. And so all of that just kind of came crashing down on me like, what are we going to do? He has to have a vehicle. We're responsible for that vehicle. and he has to have one in order to do his job. What are we going to do? We have to immediately buy another one. What does this mean for his job? Like, is he going to be fired? And what does that mean for our family? What does this mean for my husband? Is he okay? What is this going to mean for us financially? Like, all of these things going through my mind. But the thing is you've got to give yourself time to let that burn through you. And I knew that. That day was not a day for me to put shoulds on myself. And this is a big deal. Oftentimes, trauma keeps us in trauma because of the way we think about ourselves from it. Like, what does that mean about us? Before I did my healing process, I would have gone into a very deep depression over this, convinced that our lives were over, everything was ruined, that everything was going to not be okay, and that I needed to go fix everything. I was going to have to go out and get a job and find childcare, and because my husband couldn't do it anymore and he was going to lose his job. I was just sure of it, and I should have to go get a job. I should also get up and make dinner that day, and I should clean the house, and I should do the baking, and I should, and like it would become super overwhelming. The difference now is I gave myself the space to feel what I needed to feel and to experience what it was I needed to experience. I took the house cleaning off that day. I took the baking off that day. I took dinner off that day. We freaking just ordered a pizza for the kids. So I didn't have to do the cooking, and I could focus instead on what it was I needed to do to burn through the emotion and to get into solution mode, which was amazing. It literally didn't take me that long. Like, I did have to burn through that adrenaline quickly. That I did burn through the adrenaline rather quickly because I allowed myself the time and the space and the energy to feel what I needed to feel and experience what I needed to experience without putting extra shame on my husband or myself for the situation we found ourselves in. And that led us to, well, I should say that led me to doing an online search for a new work vehicle for my husband. And the crazy thing was I found one that same day. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but in Utah, where I live, finding a mail vehicle, my husband works at the post office, right? And finding a mail vehicle that is right-hand drive in Utah is incredibly difficult. And so the fact that I found one the same day for the exact right price in Utah was a miracle, because I decided, instead of feeling anxious and depressed, I was going to be determined. So what was the thought process? Instead of focusing on all of the what ifs, I decided instead to focus on the what can I do's. What is it that I can do right now? What do I have the ability to create? So that's a really important question that we can ask ourselves when trauma comes around. We can say one of two things. What is it that I can learn from this? What is it that I get to create from this situation. You can get into a pity mode, a self-pity mode. Poor me. Life is not fair. I hate life. Life doesn't show up for me. All of these things, and honestly, all those thoughts become overwhelming, and it's hard to hear and focus on what we get to learn from it, or how we get to create with God from this. When I stepped into, Lord, this is what we need now. What can you create with me, and what do I need to do? Give me my next steps. What do you want me to learn? And what do you want me to create from this situation? That's a much easier burden to carry than all those millions of shoulds, lives, things don't show up for me's, poor me's. Like, it's a much lighter burden to carry. And I can truly honestly tell you that I went from being in this space of pity me to hearing what my next step was. Get online, do a search. Get on Facebook, do a search. Oh, look at that. Here's some Facebook groups for right-hand drive mail vehicles. Oh, look at that. There's one in Utah, probably the only one in Utah. Let me go snag that. And instead of the day taking several days to work out of my system, it took a matter of a few hours because I knew what our next step was. We went, we drove, we got the vehicle, we got home at 2:30 in the morning. But still, we got the vehicle and he was able to continue his job the very next day without repercussions because it was such a fast turnaround. So let's talk about the emotion behind, like, next to those thought processes. If I would have been in the poor me mindset after this trauma and continued down that path, like, life doesn't show up for me, I can't believe this, we're gonna be broke, I'm gonna have to work 6 jobs to make up for this, my kids aren't gonna have a Christmas this year, my kids are gonna suffer, we're not gonna be able to feed our family. Like, if I would have continued down that pathway of fear, it would have led to a hopeless feeling. And that's not a place of creation. It's just not. Instead of me getting into that space and staying in that space, I thought to myself, okay, Lord, what is it you want me to learn from this? And what is it you want me to do and create? Much simpler. I have space now for determination and creation. The other thought process doesn't give you that space. All you have space for is those thoughts and hopelessness. But instead, turning it around and saying, what is it you want me to create, Lord? And what is it you want me to learn? It gives you the ability to hear your next step much clearer. And it gives you the ability to feel determined. It gives you the ability to feel peaceful, which is a space for creating miracles. Peace is where you get to create miracles. Fear mode, you will reject the miracle. You will drive them away. You won't be able to create what it is you want to create because you're actually signaling to your brain that it's something to be afraid of. And when you're afraid of something, you want to push it away. But if you're in peace and in trust with the Lord and yourself, and you're determined to find the answer, it actually calls it to you. So if we're in this feeling of peacefulness, prosperity, trust with the Lord, creation mode, what is it that I get to learn? That's a much yummier and much more fun spot to live from. And it also gives you steps on your next action. Now, let's talk about the actions. If I would have stayed in hopelessness, that actually turns to an inaction or a crippling, which is actually an action. To not do something will still get you a result that, in this case, I didn't want. Sometimes the answer is to not do something. Sometimes the answer is to sit back and allow God to work His magic. But if it's out of hopelessness and despair and like there's no point, that's not the time to not take action. But hopelessness, despair, disappointment, and rejection often lead to an inaction on our part, and so we kind of end up missing the point. However, when you become determined, you choose to be hopeful and trust the Lord and ask Him, what is it you want me to create? What is it you want me to learn? You become peaceful, you become trustful, you become hopeful. Then your next step kind of starts to become clearer. My next step was to get online and look for a postal vehicle. Then I saw one in Utah. My next step then was to connect with the owner and say, hey, we'll buy it. Then I had to drive to where this person lived, which was about 3 hours from my house, but still, we drove there, we got it, and we had to drive it home. Everything worked out okay. And as a result, we are still on track. The train was only derailed for a matter of a few seconds. It was only intense for a matter of a few seconds. But we're still on track for the things that we need to create for our family. Versus without the action, we may have still been looking for a postal vehicle. If I would have not taken action, my husband might have been out of work. There could have been so many results that I actually didn't want, which may have led me to feeling more depressed, more hopeless.
So how do you feel about boundaries? It's a legitimate question. A lot of people come to me really struggling with this concept. They often feel guilty for setting boundaries, or they're not sure about even what a boundary is. You know, they've heard the term, set the boundary, things like that, but that's really confusing for them because it's not something that's well taught in our society nowadays, right? They know that boundaries are really important to having healthy, constructive, supportive, and wonderful relationships, but why? And oftentimes they also know that they feel like their boundaries are being violated, but they can't quite pinpoint what the boundary is that's being violated. That's why I've created the Clarifying and Creating Your Boundaries free PDF. You can find out what your boundaries are, how to tune in to what the boundary needs to be, and how to effectively create and communicate your boundary so that way you stay in this place that respects you, respects the other person, but also gives you the confidence in your boundaries so that way you stop being gaslighted, disrespected, and unseen. So having your boundaries really clear gives you a voice and also helps the other person stay in accountability with themselves. So that's not a role that you have to take on anymore. So if you are ready to really have clear boundaries, to really understand what your role is in the boundary, and to give yourself some safety and some protection against people that might try to gaslight you or are just being disrespectful, go grab my Creating and Clarifying Your Boundary PDF at erinandersonthetraumacoach.com. And while you're there, let's schedule a call with me. Come have a chat with me so that way I can really help you master this particular skill, creating boundaries, clarifying the boundary, communicating that boundary, and so that way I can also help you have relationships that show up to support you, cherish you, and love you.
And that can be a stimulus that will knock me down another rung on that ladder. And that's not where I want to be. Creating a miracle with the 5-step thought process literally looks like this. Taking the stimulus, because remember, we don't have control over everything that happens in our life. Sometimes it's intense. But take the stimulus, good or bad, exciting or intense, and asking this really crucial question. What do you want me to create with this, Lord, and what do you want me to learn from it? See, when you do that question, when you ask that question, it takes both good and bad stimuluses and filters it through one filter. Instead of trying to filter it through a million different emotions and fears and thoughts and what does this mean and what could possibly happen now, it's one filter, much more simple. Miracles happen when we get peaceful. And you can't get peaceful if you're not in simplicity. Thank you, Lord, for sending this my way. What is it you desire for me to learn from this, and what do we get to create together? Miracles come when we're feeling peaceful. That thought process takes you to a peaceful place. A place of trusting the Lord, trusting yourself, which is huge for confidence. It gives you an opportunity to take some very dialed in, decisive action. You get pretty darn clear with what it is you need to do and what your next steps are. And finally, you get the result, which is the miracle you've been seeking. But it all hinges down to, what do you choose to think now? And if you think that your world is ending and that there's no hope, it keeps you stuck in a very destructive cycle for a very long time. And it truly wasn't, like, looking at, my husband's addiction, the abuse of my mom, abuse of my neighbors, like the really kind of toxic relationships that I was in that have now turned to something completely beautiful. Like, I'm grateful. Now I'm truly grateful for the relationship I have with my husband and my mom and my neighbors, and I've been able to create something completely different with them. I'm so grateful now. And I like being in a space of gratitude, because that gratitude helps me ask, what else is possible, Lord? What else do you want me to create? But it wasn't until I asked that question, Lord, what is it that you want me to do with this? What is it you want to create with me from this? What do you want me to learn? It wasn't until I asked those questions and chose to trust the Lord to take me where I needed to go that healing happened. And that healing from trauma is a miracle in and of itself. Because when you're in trauma mode, it's hard to see that there will be anything else in your life except for trauma. But to asking those questions, what am I here to learn from this? What do you want to create with me, Lord? Asking questions like that shortens the stress and gives us space and bandwidth to create and to feel something entirely different and to have a completely different experience. It is in that thought process where the roads split. The good news is if you've been dealing with trauma because of a situation or a stimulus for a long time, you can always stop the process wherever you're at and ask those questions now to start going the pathway you want to go to get to where you want to be. All right, my loves. I hope that was super helpful for you this week. Next week, let's see, what do we get to chat about? Next week, we've got Kyson coming with us next week. And we're talking about how can you be grateful for something that hurts so much? How can you choose to be grateful for something that seems like a total trial? Ooh, it's going to be so juicy, you guys. I can't wait for you to tune in. Until then, I'll see you next time. Bye. Hey, fabulous listener. I have a question for you. How done with trauma are you? Are you ready to uplevel your life and start creating the dreams that you thought were out of your reach? Are you ready to be free of the choices of other people? Are you ready to start living a life for yourself and creating the dreams that you want? And are you ready to start attracting relationships that show up to support those dreams? Are you also ready to create an amazing and deep love and trust in yourself and your decisions? If this is an absolute yes, then I want to invite you to come and join my 7-day Unashamed Chalk Talk. In this 7-day course, we are going to be going over each one of the 7 pillars for living an unashamed and completely self-trustful life. You will have some very quick, very concise, but powerful assignments to do every day. Plus, you also get access to me live for 7 days. You are going to get to learn how to set the goals that you want to achieve in your life completely unashamed, and also how to figure out what it is that's out of alignment in your life and stopping you from achieving those goals. Then we're going to get into how to get your brain to actually listen to the things that you want and start working on creating them. And also how to give yourself permission to truly love and care for yourself in an amazingly, fabulously fun way. And also how to regain the confidence and love that you deserve to give yourself, despite what anyone else thinks, says, or does about you. Now I can almost hear you say, okay, well that sounds great, but how much does it cost? That is also an exciting part of this. It's only $97. How awesome is that? For only $97, you can start creating the changes you want. There's literally no reason for you to not click on the link in the description below and get started. Come join me today in the Unashamed Chalk Talk, and I'll see you on the other side. Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me today and listening in on this podcasting episode. Don't forget to tune in next week. It's gonna be awesome.